What's up everybody, Greg Peters here with the Car Passion channel, and I know it's been a while. I just wanted to come back here and make a little video to let you guys know that I'm not abandoning you. I just haven't had a whole lot of stuff going on. Right now I'm thinking about transitioning into a new project, and the worst thing I could possibly do to prohibit that is continuously dive into projects on my existing projects. So I've just been trying to make sure the cars are a bit reliable, which I'll get into how that's going in a few minutes. Biggest update right now is I did sell the NB Miata. I know, many people were saddened, disappointed, devastated even to learn of this news. But the thing is, I was pretty much just done with the project. I bought that car so I could try several new things that I've never tried before, like the Motorsport Electronics ECU, doing a nitrous setup, doing a supercharger setup, and several other various things like that, you know, some bolt-on testing and tuning. And I pretty much did everything that I wanted to do with that car. So I just felt it was kind of time to move on from it. It went to a very good home. The new owner plans on turning that car into an exo set, which honestly is the best thing that could happen to that car because it was loaded full of awesome, fun mods, but the chassis itself was pretty rough. So basically take all those great mods that car had, pack them into a fresh Exoset chassis, and I think he's gonna end up with a really fun vehicle. And there's a chance you will see that thing sometime in the future on the channel. So that car is sold. Thinking about moving into something else. Haven't quite decided what it's gonna be yet, but I am now down to just one Miata, which is of course the red Miata, and it's been running pretty good till recently. Just take a look at this clip here of a Leakdown test I did. So for those of you that are not familiar with what exactly that means, Leakdown test puts 100 psi of pressure into the cylinder, and it helps determine if the cylinder is leaking any of that pressure out of the valves, through the rings, through a crack, through the head gasket. And when you pressurize the cylinder and the coolant starts bubbling, it means pressure is getting from the cylinder to the cooling system, which typically means head gasket issue, cracked head, cracked block in rare cases. I'm hoping it's just a head gasket, but I get the feeling that it's not because I have, as many of you know, the Vulcan cut ring style head gasket. Those things are incredibly indestructible, except for if the head or the block is warped, then it's not possible to seal it. So that's a potential issue. I've heard from some trusted sources that my combination of the head studs I have on that engine with the Vulcan ring head gasket, the studs are so strong that it can actually deform the head around the rings on that gasket, especially once it goes through some heat cycles, and especially at the power level that I'm running it at. So I'm getting ready to pull the head off that car. Hopefully it's not too bad. If it's something that requires a new bottom end, a new block, I don't know if I'm gonna build another BP for this car, but I will cross that bridge when I get to it. Yeah, anyways, let's just jump into this thing because I'm dying to find out what's wrong with it.
All right, here we go. So there's no sense in making any decisions until the head is off the engine to inspect the damage, so it's time for an absolute head removal speed run. Love me a good summoning salt video. Anyways, let's start by disconnecting the catch can lines from the valve cover, removing the ignition coils, and pulling off the VVT line and actuator. Valve cover itself is next. Once that's off, you can remove the timing belt from the cam gears, which can be done without removing any of the lower covers, by dropping a 14mm open-end wrench down behind the water pump pulley, loosening the timing belt tensioner, removing the spring, and slipping the belt off the gears. Now I'll disconnect the fuel lines, and please make sure your fuel system is depressurized and your gas cap is off and your battery is disconnected and you have a fire extinguisher nearby anytime you're working with an open fuel system. Technically, you can remove the head with the fuel rail attached and the injectors in place, but on my specific setup, the injectors are difficult to unplug, and you'll basically only run into this if you're using Injector Dynamics 1300s combined with a Skunk 2 manifold on an NB cylinder head. Anyways, now that that's out of the way, I can disconnect the V-band on the back of the turbo. When I'm trying to speed run a head pull, I'll do everything in my power to not mess with the turbo lines, so I unbolt the downpipe, which lets me move the turbo and manifold as one unit just far enough out of the way so I can remove the head and leave all that in the engine bay. Now, I've already drained all the coolant and disconnected the coolant hoses from the head, and since I'm removing the head with the intake manifold attached, which is another one of my speedrunning strats because I hate trying to get to the bottom nuts on the intake manifold. Anyways, all that's left to do is loosen the head studs and pull this baby off. And I usually actually remove the head studs completely because it just makes it easier to lift the head off by myself with the intake manifold and the cams and lifters, and maybe I'm just weak, but this thing is kind of a unit when it's fully assembled. Also, people always ask me how long jobs take that I do in my videos, and I never really have a good answer because jobs typically take about 3 to 5 times longer when filming an instructional video on that job. But since for this, I just left the camera rolling and did my thing, I can see that I have about 54 minutes of footage for just the head removal, if that gives you any kind of idea. So checking out the internals here, first off, the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm fully aware I have a rusty coolant issue. I've flushed and refilled this system multiple times with distilled water and coolant, and within a few weeks, it just goes brown again. I have a couple aftermarket steel couplers in my cooling system, which I think might be contributing, but that's not the problem I'm trying to solve right now. As you can see, clearly cylinders 2 and 3, especially number 2, have been taking on water through the head gasket. And if the head was warping upwards in the middle, that would make perfect sense. Now, the fire rings still appear to be intact and in good condition, but like I said before, if the head is not flat, then they still won't seal. I cleaned up the deck surface and the pistons a little bit to get a closer look, and let me tell you, cylinder number 1 and 4 look beautiful, like they're fresh from the machine shop. But cylinders number 2 and 3, not so much. Clearly, water getting into the cylinders combined with a few periods of sitting for 1 to 2 weeks at a time has caused some corrosion on the cylinder walls. Now, it does look much worse than it feels, which is good, but you can definitely tell cylinders 2 and 3 don't feel quite as smooth as 1 and 4, which is quite unfortunate.
Well, exactly what I was most afraid of is the case. Obviously, the cylinder walls, as you saw on cylinder number 2 and 3, are fried. Unfortunately, to get this car back to where it was, it's gonna need a new block, or at least get the block machined. Essentially an entire build from the ground up. Very disappointing. I don't know, I feel like I'm just kind of doing the same thing over and over and not really going anywhere. I mean, obviously it was sick when it was running, it was fun while it lasted, but I'm a little burned out on the whole uncharted territory thing. Part of me thinks like, okay, I just should have stuck to the formula that everyone else uses going north of 400 horsepower and would have been fine, but I just always wanted to keep trying to push the envelope of everything. I'm like, why wouldn't it work if it was max high compression and high boost and E85 and 500 horsepower, but still has good low end torque and like ultimate street car Miata is what I've always been chasing. And this time I feel like I just pushed it a little too hard again. I don't know, what would you guys do in this scenario? I just don't know if I have the energy to build another BP, like to put the time and effort into just getting this car back to where it was again, spending all that time, money, obviously, just to hope it works the third time. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe I'll be back here again in 6 months or 12 months or something like that. I'm not sure what else to say in this video. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. There will be a next video. There may not be the next BP, but there will be a next video. So anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya. Okay, it is the next day. I've had a night to sleep and just be sad and depressed about putting all this work into this thing and having this happen after really not getting to drive it that much. But I've decided to do something. So as you can see here, I did a freaking speed run head disassembly. I've decided to do something that I would not recommend anyone in my position do.
Machine.
Hello, I have a cylinder head that I just need to get resurfaced. Is that something that I can bring to you guys?
Between 8:30 and 4:30, Monday through Friday.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome, bye-bye.
All right, bye. I'm gonna get that head resurfaced. I'm gonna put it onto my smoked block with a new head gasket, and I'm gonna send it. Just a beautiful day to be walking around town with a cylinder head. Any day's a good day for that, if you ask me. Fresh cut on that beast, ready to be slapped back together. Home safe. So the machine shop had to remove about 55 thousandths from the head to get it flat again. They said it was only warped about 4 thousandths, which I don't think is that much. It seems really minimal to me. I mean, let me show you what that looks like. There you go. That right there is 4 thousandths. So they're saying that's how much the head was warped. I don't know if that's enough to cause the head gasket to leak, but the head is flat now. But what caused this to happen? I've heard from a trusted source that it could have something to do with the specific combination of the apex head studs, which is what I have in the motor, combined with the Vulcan cut ring head gasket. And it could be a couple different factors. Let's start with the torque. According to the torquing instructions, which I'll link these down below in the description so you can check them out yourself, 50 foot-pounds is the recommended torque for these head studs. Stock, I believe, is 43. It's obviously a completely different metal, so it's apples to oranges, but the instructions state 50 foot-pounds. This achieves a little over the stock clamp load target. The same load achieved by other stud kits, which I'm assuming they mean AARP, but they probably just don't want to, throw names out there. The same that's achieved by other stud kits at 65 foot-pounds. So that means the apex studs at 50 foot-pounds achieve the same clamp load, I'm assuming because of the material that they're made from, at 50 foot-pounds as other aftermarket stud kits at 65 foot-pounds. We would generally suggest 60 foot-pounds, which achieves far more clamp load than is needed for most applications. 75 foot-pounds is the max recommended. Above that, it's possible to break your block. So initially I built the engine at 75 foot-pounds, and then when I discovered that they had come loose, for whatever reason that is, not stretching obviously, but probably something to do with the head somehow getting closer to the block. I'm not exactly sure. I retorqued them to 80. So it's possible that, number one, the head was actually being warped by too much torque being applied to the head studs. I don't know if that's possible, but in my mind it is, and not in all cases, but because the gasket I was using had these steel rings that have grooves in them, and then the head gasket itself is made from a fiber type material with the rubber sealing surface on it. So it's certainly possible for the gasket material to compress farther than the ring itself. So imagine you have an extreme clamp load being put down on this ring. It could potentially bend the head slightly around these rings enough so that certain parts of them are not sealing. Again, it's not for sure, but in my mind, maybe it's possible. Another thing is, under that clamp load, now take that force and add extreme heat cycling into it. The apex head studs have so much more clamping force than what the majority of people out there are using, because these are relatively new, that maybe they don't have give in the right direction, and that was causing it to warp with all the heat cycling. Again, I'm not really sure. There's just not a ton of people running the Vulcan cut ring head gaskets along with the apex head studs, so there's just not a lot of research out there. It's again, something I'm trying that not a lot of people have tried. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm the first, but obviously it's a much less popular combo versus ARP head studs, Cometic MLS head gasket. That's like the recipe for years and years and years. This is newer, relatively speaking. So what I'm gonna try is keeping the apex studs in the engine, but I'm gonna be using a Cometic MLS head gasket. And I'm gonna torque to the roughly recommended 60 pound-feet of torque. And I'm just gonna leak down test it, obviously, once I reassemble the engine, and then drive it and see what happens. Unfortunately, cylinders 2 and 3 are damaged from the water sitting in the cylinders, but the engine is gonna... Did you hear the pops and bangs in Ricer Alley? Anyways, what was I saying? If I want to keep a BP in the car, it's gonna have to be rebuilt at some point. I would rather put this head back on, let it last a while. Okay, maybe it's gonna burn some extra oil Who knows how long it's actually gonna last, but it's gonna have to be rebuilt at some point. I'd rather just get a little more life out of it than deal with rebuilding it when it's time for that to happen. So fingers crossed that putting the head back on, new head gasket is gonna seal everything up and it'll be okay for at least a while. So anyways, enough talking. Let's get back to work.
No need to show everything in reverse here. I got the head and block surface all cleaned up and prepped. I got the head dropped on. Filled up the required fluids, and before firing it up, I wanted to do a leak down test on each cylinder to preliminarily make sure that everything was sealed up.
I checked the leak down on all 4 cylinders, and the moment of truth is going to be, is any coolant going to be pushed out of this hole right here? If it does, then it was basically all for naught, and I'm back to where I started. But there's no way I could have known that this would have failed if I didn't try, and it didn't really cost me that much. I already had an extra MLS head gasket. It cost me about $100 to get the head cut flat again, and that was really the only cost. So now it's all back together. I'm about to leak down the cylinders, and because I'm a sucker for a little suspense, I'm gonna do the cylinder that was leaking last. So let's see how the results come out.
Here we have cylinder number 1, absolute beauty, showing just about 10% leak down, which is about as good as you're gonna get. Remember, some air is always gonna leak past the rings, and this engine is stone cold, so the results should be even better if I were to retest it hot. Cylinder number 4 is at 35%, not as good as number 1, but still technically in the green range, and the machine shop did tell me that some of my exhaust valves weren't sealing perfectly, but it is what it is at this point. Cylinder number 3 looking better than 4 at 24%, but the scary one is coming up here. Cylinder number 2, the one that was pushing mad air into the coolant. So we'll see how that goes right after a word from today's video sponsor.
So some of you guys may have heard about a game called Raid Shadow Legends. Nah, I'm just kidding. I turned down their sponsorship, but today's video is sponsored by myself and my Patreon. So if you are interested in supporting the Car Passion channel and what I do here, you can check out my Patreon link down in the description below. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed. Your names are all on screen right now. I appreciate you so much. And let's get back to that leak down test.
Okay, cylinder number 2, the problem child, sending it, and okay, it's not perfect, obviously. Sitting at 40% leak down, which is still technically at the bad end of the good range, so it's okay, but the good news is coolant isn't blasting out of the radiator like it was before, so I'd call it good enough. Let's fire this beast up.
All right, boys, here goes nothing. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. Prime that fuel pump, make sure fuel's not spraying everywhere. We got fuel pressure, excellent. However, what I probably should do is plug in the ignition coils. I've heard that does aid in cold starts, having your ignition plugged in. So everything is looking really good so far. I brought it up to full operating temperature and nothing has gone wrong yet. It is getting really late, so I'm not gonna drive it tonight. Tomorrow morning, I need to bleed out the coolant system. There's definitely oil that's gotten into the cooling system because of the head gasket leak. So I wanna flush out as much of that as possible, get some fresh coolant in there, and then I'll take it out for a good hard rip. Full power. I mean, might as well put the thing to the test, right? Anyways, catch you guys in the morning. Well, boys, should we give her a little send and see what happens? Okay, my GoPro died right in the beginning of the pull. But anyways, as I was saying, know if you could hear that through the camera, but there was a pretty loud pop when I got on boost right there. Everything seems to be running fine, so I'm just gonna check the engine bay out real quick. Hopefully it was nothing major. Car's still running, so we'll see. Could not find anything. It sounded like an intercooler pipe blew off, and I was messing with the intercooler piping earlier this morning, but that's not the case. So I don't know, it seems like one of those things where you ever have your car make just an absurd noise and it seems like it's just messing with you. I feel like my car does that sometimes. Anyways, I'm gonna continue with the drive, do a few more rips, and fingers crossed. So I took a couple logs of this noise, which unfortunately I was not imagining and does not seem harmless. Have not looked at the logs yet, but I think what's going on is could be detonation or some other kind of uncontrolled combustion, because the Cometic head gasket is 40 thousandths. The cut ring head gasket is it's like 55 thousandths. So I think what I've done is I've reduced my squish clearance by too much, because if you remember from my build video, you could see that the pistons actually go above the block deck. I think they're just almost right on the head. I have to go back and look at my notes and see what the squish has been reduced to, but I think it's probably too much.
I also just wanted to interject here and say, regardless of what the squish clearance was reduced to, the actual compression ratio had a significant gain due to the factors that are highlighted in blue changing. It actually went from 11.8 to 1 up to 12.5 to 1. So it could just be a matter of too much compression and too much boost, finally finding the limit of E85. And although I probably shouldn't have, I did do a couple more pulls while reducing the ignition timing significantly with basically no improvement. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
The kind of good news is it seems to be okay up to like 15 pounds of boost. So at least the car is drivable. I'll probably set it really safe, like 10 or something, but probably just have to swap that head gasket out to a 60 thousandths MLS or whatever is the closest to that, which kind of sucks. I have to do another head gasket, but at least the car's running for now. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.